Last night, the Trump administration unilaterally halted all grant, loan, and federal assistance programs for at least 90 days. Today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said this is a temporary pause and freeze to ensure that all of the money going out from Washington, D.C. Is in line with Donald's agenda. We need to be clear. This freeze illegally usurps the power of the purse that is the sole purview of Congress. It violates the Impoundment Act of 1974. It is blatantly and inarguably unconstitutional. The United States of America, 8 days into the new administration, has been plunged into a deep and rapidly expanding constitutional crisis. Let's dive in. Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's edition of Mary Shop Live. It's been something of a day. All right, before we dive into the details of what's been going on, just to a quick update, a U.S. district judge has blocked the Trump administration's budget freeze. We'll get to that later, but we don't know whether or not the Trump administration is going to follow the judge's orders, do we? So let's look at what's actually going on here. This freeze, again, this is not an authority the executive branch has. Control of the budget redounds to Congress. The freeze includes aid to nonprofits and universities, small business loans, state and local government grants, including those for local daycare centers, as well as cancer research and much, much more. This is already having an impact on tens of millions of Americans, and the sweep and scope of this action are staggering. Let's take a look.
Federal agencies are nearing a deadline of 5 p.m. Eastern time today to stop making grant and loan payments to hundreds of organizations that rely on them to stay open. The move requires federal agencies to identify and review all federal financial assistance programs and supporting activities consistent with the president's policies and requirements.
There is widespread confusion throughout Washington today about this. You've got Republican and Democratic senators alike saying that they are being bombarded with phone calls from panicked organizations in their states who are trying to figure out if their federal funding is about to be cut off, and if so, for how long. So that's what I asked Caroline Leavitt about today in her first White House briefing. Take a listen to what she had to say.
It is a temporary pause, and the Office of Management and Budget is reviewing the federal funding that has been going out the door. Again, not for individual assistance, but for all of these other programs that I mentioned. I also spoke with the incoming director of OMB this morning, and he told me to tell all of you that the line to his office is open.
Already lying. Yeah, she definitely came out of central casting. That's for sure. All right. You know the expression that Adam Seward coined, I don't know, probably 8 years ago now, the cruelty is the point. So too is the chaos. There is so much more to get to, but before I continue, please take a second to like and share this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and rate and follow our podcast, because we are on all podcast platforms. So we saw a bit from the press briefing today, but very, very few questions were answered because apparently she's been well trained in not just lying, but evasion. Leavitt, again, called this a temporary pause. Whether or not it's temporary, it's still unconstitutional and illegal. And the idea, or at least, it's being implemented under the guise of making sure that horrific things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility aren't funded. or that programs, either intentionally or not, are not spending any money on things like abortion care and gender ideology. So here's a quote. This memorandum requires federal agencies to identify and review all federal financial assistance programs and supportive activities consistent with Donald's policies and requirements. The Office of Management and Budget is directing federal officials to assess compliance with Donald's executive orders. Again, specifically targeting, and this is another quote, this is how immature and cruel these people are. DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal, unquote. It doesn't give specifics on what these policies refer to. And I think that's by design, right? The vagueness of the language is by design, especially since the Green New Deal was never signed into law. So I'm not entirely sure what they're even talking about. It's just, code for the base. Quote, the use of federal resources to advance Marxist equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering policy is a waste of taxpayer dollars that does not improve the day-to-day lives of those we serve. Unquote. Yeah, except those of us who actually believe in equity and think that transgender people have a right to have all of the rights we have, and who think that, saving the planet from big oil and the Republican Party is not such a terrible idea. I guess it depends on your perspective, right? What does not depend on your perspective is whether or not you're prepared for this, right? So here's Senator Chuck Schumer discussing the budget halts this morning. Here's what he had to say.
Last night, President Trump plunged the country into chaos. Without a shred of warning, the Trump administration announced a halt to virtually all federal funds across the country. In an instant, Donald Trump has shut off billions, perhaps trillions of dollars that directly support states, cities, towns, schools, hospitals, small businesses, and most of all, American families. This is a dagger at the heart of the average American family in red states, in blue states, in cities, in suburbs, in rural areas. It is just outrageous. Funds for things like disaster assistance, local law enforcement, rural hospitals, aid to the elderly, food for people in need, all are on the chopping block in this new administration. Why? They need tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy, and these cuts, they think, will fund them.
Just in case you were wondering, those groups that Senator Schumer spoke about, the elderly, the farmers, children, people with disabilities, et cetera, a lot of them are Republicans too. Are we going to say that this is what they voted for? Probably not. This is rightly called by Representative Jamie Raskin an assault on civil society. We knew this was coming, or at least we should have known. But when asked which Democrats are leading the charge against Donald's anti-American agenda, the barely sentient Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin said, and this is an actual direct quote, "I can't answer that. Give us a little time. This is brand new," unquote. Now, granted, back in 2017, I was in my living room and nobody could hear me, but I've been calling Donald Trump and his agenda and those surrounding him fascist since then. Many people have been saying for years that American democracy is on a knife's edge. Well, not anymore. And you're not prepared because this is all new to you. Okay, so what is at risk here? And again, it's been blocked, but we don't know what's going to happen in the next few days. Human rights lawyer Qasim Rashid posted this earlier today. Quote, Governor Pritzker's office confirms Trump funding freeze has shut Illinois out of Medicaid. 4 million Illinoisans rely on Medicaid for their health care. Trump's freeze will kill people. He's doing this so, quote, money isn't wasted on DEI initiatives, unquote. But this was not just the state of Illinois. It was shut down in all 50 states because the Medicaid portal, which is run by the federal government and states need to sign into, was offline. Multiple lawmakers in Congress reported earlier today that states are being shut out of Medicaid payment portals after the freeze on all federal financial assistance, despite a new White House fact sheet saying that Medicaid is not subject to the pause. Do not listen to what they say, watch what they do. So yeah, Medicaid portals are down in all 50 states. And this is according to a post on Twitter from Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. Wyden called it, quote, said, quote, this is a blatant attempt to rip away health insurance from millions of Americans overnight and will get people killed, unquote. I don't think it's an understatement to say this could not have come at a worse time. Infectious diseases are becoming more threatening by the day. There's an ongoing outbreak of tuberculosis in the Kansas City metro area that has reportedly become the largest in U.S. history. Quote, currently, Kansas has the largest outbreak that they've ever had in history, Ashley Goss, a deputy secretary at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, told the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee on January 21st. Can only imagine how bad things are now with the CDC not being able to communicate with other health agencies. Jill Bronow, communications director for the department, said in an email that the area's current TB outbreak marks, quote, the largest documented outbreak in U.S. history, presently since the 1950s, when the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention started monitoring and reporting TB cases, unquote. This is not just affecting the United States. Of course, those abroad will also suffer and already have started suffering because of this decision. The new administration ordered a halt to the supply of medical aid related to HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis. Well, see Kansas City, as well as the supplies of drugs and equipment meant for newborns in USAID-supported countries, according to a memo reviewed by Reuters. Some of the contractors and partners working with USAID received notification of ceasing their related work right away. One such memo was sent to Chemonics. That's a major U.S. consulting firm that collaborates with USAID to supply crucial medicines and aid globally. Atul Gawande, who's the former head of global health at USAID and who left the agency this month, said, quote, this is catastrophic. Donated drug supplies keeping 20 million people living with HIV alive. That stops today. Are student loans affected? There are a lot of questions about that. Observers and stakeholders are struggling to interpret the order and determine which specific programs may be impacted. Millions of student loan borrowers on track for student loan forgiveness, thanks to the Biden administration, and many other current and prospective students who rely on federal student aid, including grants and student loans, could potentially be impacted as well. But many critical details still remain murky. And again, that adds to the confusion, which adds to the chaos. And then, of course, Head Start programs are being affected. Several members of Congress said they were being slammed with questions from their constituents and organizations that could be affected. Leave It, the press secretary, said Tuesday that she would provide a list of organizations affected. I mean, could have had one with you already. So Head Start It's an incredibly important program. It's for low-income children or children in low-income families. And the memo has the, quote, potential to severely disrupt the ability for Head Start programs to serve nearly 800,000 children and their families nationwide, unquote. This is what the organization Meals on Wheels had to say earlier today. Quote, if in fact this order includes the Older Americans Act, this would presumably halt service to millions of vulnerable seniors who have no other means of purchasing or preparing meals, unquote. The president and CEO of the National Council of Nonprofits, Diane Yentl, said on social media that the order is a, quote, potential 5-alarm fire for nonprofits. She continued, from pausing research on cures for childhood cancer to closing homeless shelters, halting food assistance, reducing safety from domestic violence, and shutting down suicide hotlines, the impact of even a short pause in funding could be devastating and cause lives. This order could decimate thousands of organizations and leave neighbors without the services they need, unquote. This is the definition of a constitutional crisis, when one branch of government usurps the power given by the Constitution to another branch of government. Many alarms were raised about the constitutionality of the federal funding freeze, and Senator Chris Murphy joined Senate Democrats at a press conference on Tuesday. Watch this clip.
And today, the illegal and unconstitutional decision to put the President of the United States and no one else in charge of who gets federal money and who doesn't. What President Trump is doing is seizing control of the federal budget and deciding by himself who gets money and who doesn't. This is what a king does. This is not how a democracy works. One man does not decide how taxpayers' money is spent so that it only gets sent to the president's political friends and it gets used to punish his political enemies.
Yes, we must emphasize how illegal and unconstitutional this move is. We have no right to be unprepared for this. Democrats need to figure out how to handle this, considering they are the party out of power. But more than anything right now, because this is about messaging, Democrats, as I said, cannot do anything if this is allowed to continue, or more likely, if it does get blocked by the judiciary and the executive branch says, try to stop me. People need to be told in no uncertain terms. They're ending funding for cancer research. They are letting children and old people starve. That seems pretty clear to me. As I mentioned earlier today, a judge temporarily blocked the order. This would be federal judge Lauren Ali Khan. He granted an administrative stay, in effect pausing the plan. It extends until Monday afternoon for existing programs, and this has forced the Trump administration to defend its freeze on thousands of federal programs. And, basically, the judge needs more time to analyze this just amazing sweep and scope of this illegal and unconstitutional action. A New York attorney, Letitia James, knocked the freeze as, quote, reckless and dangerous, unquote, and a threat to families that rely on those funds. And today she announced plans to file a lawsuit to block the Trump administration's funding freeze. Let's watch this.
Not only does this administration's new policy put people at risk, but it is plainly unconstitutional. The president does not get to decide which laws to enforce and for whom. When Congress dedicates funding for a program, the president cannot pull that funding on a whim. Later today, I am leading and joining with my colleagues, my fellow Democratic attorney generals, in suing this administration to stop this illegal freeze of essential funds for our state. We will not stand for any illegal policy that puts essential services for millions of Americans at risk. And we work tirelessly overnight to ensure that that does not happen. Our lawsuit will seek a court order to immediately stop the enforcement of the OMB policy and to preserve essential funding for Americans.
Yes, more of that, please. Listen, there will be multiple lawsuits filed, and they will be filed quickly. They will be heard quickly. They will advance through the ranks of the courts quickly. This will be going to the Supreme Court. One of the great tragedies is that I cannot say with any confidence that this corrupt, illegitimate supermajority will not side with Donald Trump. And even if they say explicitly that this order, this freeze, so-called, is both illegal and unconstitutional, I'm pretty sure his response will be, "You and what army?" All right, this week we have Bob Kennedy's confirmation hearing to look forward to. He's been nominated to be the head of Health and Human Services, which would be a total disaster. Again, see tuberculosis and bird flu. In a letter, a public letter to senators, his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, branded Bob a predator, unfit for Health and Human Services Secretary, and she expressed alarm at his behavior and past influence on family members. Here she is in her own words with some deeply disturbing allegations.
I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator.
She wrote this letter to a group of senators and alleges that her cousin is, quote, addicted to power, has given hypocritical advice on vaccines, led family members, quote, down the path of addiction, and describes disturbing scenes at the places where he's lived.
His basement, his garage, his dorm room were always the center of the action, where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in a blender to feed to his hawks. It was often a perverse scene of despair and violence.
Will it matter? Will it? Caroline Kennedy also accused her cousin of preying on the desperation of parents and sick children in discussing his virulently anti-vaccine stance. He's not a vaccine skeptic. He is virulently anti-vaccine. And, you know, we've seen that he has publicly discouraged vaccinations while, of course, privately immunizing his own children and himself. She invoked her father, President John Kennedy, asserting that he would be disgusted, and she urged the Senate to reject her cousin's nomination, which I do too. They don't listen to me. Bob Kennedy has declined to comment on his cousin's claims when approached on Capitol Hill ahead of his confirmation hearing, which, by the way, is tomorrow, and we will be live streaming it. It starts at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Funny story. Remember we pledged to end every episode with an emotional support moment? Both Mercedes and I, because they're like, okay, what's a good thing that happened? Both Mercedes and I, without knowing it, Googled, this was my search term, was there any good news today? No, there was not. There was not. So I urge you in the chat, please, if you have good news, if you have a picture of something, anything that will give us some kind of solace, please. I mean, I don't think we can share. Darn it. Okay, well, we'll figure something out, but give us something to work with here, please. Yeah, because we need something to counteract what's been happening. And again, I think one of the the thing that's causing this undercurrent of anxiety, and an overcurrent of anxiety, quite frankly, is not knowing if the Supreme Court will hold, and even if they do, not knowing if the executive branch is going to care. And then what? Then what do we do? Before I get to your comments and questions, I just also want to say that to the Democrats, if you don't think you have permission to be the party of opposition now, I do not believe there is any hope for you. Not one Democrat should vote to confirm any of the remaining nominees. If you do so, you shame yourself. All right, we have a photo, and I think this is going to take it down a notch. So let's see. Let's see our emotional support. Oh my God, it's a red panda. I love red pandas. I actually love red pandas. And that is a beautiful red panda sticking his tongue out. Or her tongue, sorry, or their tongue. I don't know. The Trump administration, that red panda is not putting up with this nonsense. I would love to have a red panda, but unlike Bob Kennedy, I don't think people should have wild animals as pets because it's cruel. Don't even get me started on the blender thing. When I grew up, my dad had snakes. And he moved into, after my parents got divorced, he moved into a new apartment. And I was little. I was like 6 or something. And the first thing you see when you walk in is a basement apartment was a bunch of tanks. We had a python. I think we had a boa constrictor. And there was a tank of, we had garter snakes. There was a tank of goldfish. And there was a tank of mice. And I thought those were pets too. No. But, snakes need to live, need to eat. But you let it happen naturally. Anyway, oh man. If what she said is not enough to convince Republicans, we already know. We already know about Republicans, don't we? All right. So, Suzanne, this is wonderful news. Good news. My 18-year-old cat didn't die today. Awesome. And I hope she doesn't for a very long time, as long as she's healthy and happy. Darla, the Supreme Court needs to rein in their boy before he removes them. Yeah, their fate is sealed. Their fate is sealed. I tell you, if he gets a result he does not want, he will convince or pay off Samuel Alito and what's his name, Clarence Thomas, to retire, and he will replace them with Heritage Foundation endorsed right-wing hardcore fascist embryos who will be on the court for at least another 90 years. From Katz, Amanda, and Friends. As a Canadian, I would support states joining us. Okay. That sounds like a plan. I wouldn't mind having a Canadian passport, I have to be honest with you. AJ Vintage, good news, we're live. Yeah, and coffee is legal so far. It's a low bar, but you have a point. We are live. Coffee is legal, and it's also not 5 times more expensive than it's going to be in the not too distant future. From Hazy Trippin' Daisies, the good news is there is hope. History has seen worse. We are strong. I completely agree with you. Sometimes, though, it's hard to find the silver lining, right? But if the Democratic Party kind of figures out how to gain some leverage, and they will have some when it comes to the debt ceiling negotiations that are going to be taking place in a few months, then yeah, absolutely. From Lizzie Beth, smallest good news ever. My lost dog is found. Wait, My lost dog is found, has been to the vet, and is recovering from its. That is not small. What? That's huge. You lost your dog and found your dog again, and he, she, or they is going to be okay. That's a major piece of good news. So thank you for sharing. And give your very, very good dog a hug from all of us. From Mary, my cat sat on my lap for an hour. Yeah, that's neither of my cats is particularly affectionate, but every once in a while, I mean like once every 3 months, Cap will sit on me. I always think it's because something's wrong, but it's like, and no matter what I have to do, I will not move until she's ready to let me go. Because you do not look that gift horse in the mouth. Sabrina, we need local meetups to get action going. Yeah, we do. We really do. Mercedes, get on that. Mercedes has so much free time. She's got, that's consider it done. Actually, she would do it, but she's busy. It's my fault entirely. Okay, so I want to thank all of our donators and super stickers. Demon Fox Akira, hoping his fan club finally wakes up now that he's made it clear he has no qualms taking what they need. First they came is on a speed run, y'all. Look at me sounding like an idiot saying y'all. No, because it's a great word. I'm from New York. I just cannot. I can't say it with authenticity. I wish I could, because it's like the best pronoun ever. Yeah, listen, some of them never will. They'll figure out somebody else to blame. It's important to remember this. One thing people hate more than anything is being wrong, and they would rather continue to be wrong, even if it's their expense, than admitting they were. So it doesn't bode well. Suki56, thank you so much. That's amazing. I'm so sorry you're related to Dada. Yeah, just saying. Yep, I'm actually quite sorry about that too. But luckily, I was found under a rock. So that is a mitigating factor. From Zero, again, thank you. So generous, so helpful. Thank you for being awesome, Mary. Thank you for being awesome. Big thanks to the mods. Absolutely. Always thank our mods. Thank you, F. Leah. That's very kind. Thank you, Anthony. Can you please explain as a psychologist how Donald can live with himself after being so cruel and causing so much suffering? I can't understand. I don't have enough time to do that right now, but what I will say is he loves being cruel. That's just how some people are wired. It gives him, it's the closest he comes to feeling joy is inflicting harm on other people. And guess what? We knew that. And here we are. Thank you, Lisa. That is wonderful of you. And thank you, Suki. Again. Yes. Suki56 says, I need to get a cat. That might make me chill. It will make you cool. I'm getting a kitten this kitten season. So, hang on to your hats, because that's just going to be the emotional support moment every night. In fact, I may just have 24-hour streaming of my kitten. Let's see. Thank you, Rosanna. Very kind. Also from Rosanna, happy birthday, Nina. Love you. Lots of O's, hearts, and X's. It's like, yeah, it's like when Siri tells you what the emojis are. That's what I just did there. All right, my friends. This has been a day. So I'm glad we were here with you to walk through all of it. Because wow, buckle up. And we are gonna keep going. So again, to our fabulous moderators, to all of you watching, everybody watching on YouTube, everybody listening to the podcast, we're really trying to make that grow. And of course, everybody putting in comments and the donations, the super stickers. I probably say it. I don't know if I say it enough or not enough or whatever, but you have no idea how much it helps us and what it means to us. So, especially on a day like this, it was brutal. It was a brutal day. And gonna let everybody go, especially Mercedes. Mercedes definitely needs to take a break. So thanks, Mercedes. Thank you, Malone. Thank you, Lexi. Thank you, Dennis, for this amazing show today. And we will be back tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern every weeknight. And I'm still trying to get Mercedes to let me do this 7 days a week, but so far she's sticking to her guns. She's laughing hysterically right now. And probably going to get me committed if I keep it up. But anyway, everybody have a wonderful night. I'll see you back here. And don't forget, we have videos dropping every day, 2 and 4. At least that, yes, 2 and 4. And the live at 6, plus the nerds, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see you tomorrow in one form or another. In the meantime, please stay safe and be kind. Good night.